Hey, what's going on everybody? Welcome back to Baker Reviews. I have something a little bit different for us today. I figured we could have a little fun with a quick tier list. With it being 2024, we have a certain horror anniversary this year. Before there was Michael Myers and Halloween, Friday the 13th, Nightmare on Elm Street, we had the now iconic horror classic, Tobe Hooper's The Texas Chainsaw Massacre. And although this isn't the first slasher in the genre, you had movies like Psycho and Peeping Tom, this is what many people cite as the movie that got them into the genre. Now, full disclosure, I'm not the biggest fan of this franchise. We have a live stream coming up where we're going to be ranking 31 movies, including all 9 of these, and upon my rewatch, it's become painfully obvious that the Texas Chainsaw Massacre movies just aren't really my flavor. With that being said, I'm going to have a few unpopular opinions, 2 especially that you guys are going to hate. I'm going to have a few unpopular opinions, and that's okay. I'm sure you guys might have a few as well. That's why it's fun to talk about movies. Definitely leave your ranking or your tier list down in the comments below so we can talk all about these. And with that being said, let's jump right into the tiers. Alright guys, so first up we have The Golden Chainsaw. First of all, hi Dead Meat. But this is a tier obviously for the tippity top movies. Spoiler, I'm only going to have 1 in here, but this is not only a nod to James and Dead Meat, a channel that is fantastic, but there's literally a movie where Leatherface gets a golden chainsaw, and it's badass. And moving right down, we have Chop Top tier. You see what I did there? These are the movies that just miss that S ranking of Texas Chainsaw. Movies that are really solid, but I'm not going to rewatch as much as I am this guy up here. Alright, now third we have Spoiled Meat, and this one is below the bottom of the barrel and kind of good. You know, this one's pretty self-explanatory. This is a family of murdering psychopaths, and while they may not mind spoiled meat, I do. And then finally, the most cringe-inducing line in horror movie history. Do your thing, cuz I think we know at least 1 movie automatically that's going in this tier. Also, I didn't put these in any order, I just kind of randomized them, that way we're not going chronological. You know, I just wanted to do them random. I think it's more fun that way, so it's not like 1 to 9, we're all over the place. So with that being said guys, we are starting with what I would classify as the most forgettable and boring Texas Chainsaw movie. This is gonna be Texas Chainsaw Massacre 3 Leatherface. Not to be confused with 2017's Leatherface. I'm not sure why they named 2 movies the same thing, but it's not the only mistake this franchise made. I think you are going to be our first entry into Spoiled Meat. Now, I'm going to put this movie here because it doesn't do anything to like outright piss me off, but it's also not memorable in any sense. Like, I watched this movie about 30 hours ago. I don't remember a thing about it. I remember Viggo Mortensen's in it as Tex. I remember Joe Grizzly, bitch. I know Joe Grizzly's in this movie, and as I mentioned, I know Leatherface gets a golden chainsaw. You have a decent firefight between this one character and Tex. I know it retcons everything from the first 2 movies. Guys, this timeline is really bad, and this is coming from a Friday the 13th fan. So you have a complete retcon of the first 2 movies, where you have like this maternal figure now, you have this little girl who's learning to kill. It's not that it's necessarily a bad movie, it is just so forgettable. So for that reason, this is going to be my first entry into Spoiled Meat.
Looks like meat's back on the menu, boys!
Sorry guys, Viggo Mortensen, I had to make the joke. Alright, well speaking of, next up is going to be 2017's Leatherface. For me, I think this is a pretty bad movie. There is another prequel origin story that we'll talk about later that I enjoyed significantly more. This one is just the same way I didn't need to see Anakin Skywalker as a little kid. I don't really need to see Leatherface as like a preteen or a teenager, whatever he's supposed to be. You know, this movie is essentially a mystery, like, which one is it? You have 4 characters and one's a girl, so immediately take her off the table. You have one guy who dies fairly early, so it really comes down to 2. And, I mean, let's be honest, Bud is one of the biggest red herrings in movie history. I mean, the dude literally has the perfect build. He's the strong silent type that doesn't talk. He can kill people at the snap of a finger. This dude was so obviously the right choice for Leatherface, but instead they went with the subvert your expectation pick of Jed. I just don't like the idea of knowing that my Leatherface was like hitting on nurses. Something about that doesn't sit right. Like, Leatherface is obviously a guy who was born with a disability, a mental disability. That's not usually something that just happens. That's something you're born with. And, you know, I hate the fact that it starts as this charming guy who suddenly turns to Leatherface because he gets his face all fucked up. Like, Jed was the perfect pick. Even if it's too obvious, I don't care. He should not have been a red herring. He absolutely should have been Leatherface. The movie absolutely butchered that aspect. There's also just some random ass weird stuff happening in this. Like when there's like the whole juvie or hospital breakout, there's like this random blowjob happening between two of our characters for absolutely no reason. Feels like a movie that Rob Zombie would have made. And I say that in the worst possible way. Some of these characters shooting innocent people in the diner for no reason. Not in a fun way like The Family, just in a mean-spirited way that I didn't really jive with. You have them absolutely fumbling the bag with Bud, who should have been Leatherface. And the only good moment from the movie really is Jed at the beginning after he gets his face stitched up, like chainsawing his friend. That was pretty dope. Other than that, I don't like this movie at all. Well guys, next up, Texas Chainsaw 3D. If this isn't a movie tailor-made for the do your thing cuz tier, I don't know what is. I hate so much about it. First of all, the continuity is awful. This is a continuance of the 1974 Chainsaw movie, and they establish in the beginning that there was a baby discovered in that original movie. This movie flashes forward like 40 years, and then they show a 27-year-old Alexandra Daddario. Like either this is the best looking 40-year-old of all time, or this movie just didn't give a shit about its continuity. You know, she's of course revealed to be a daughter of the Sawyer family, and it bugs me enough that this whole plot could have been avoided if she just would have read that damn letter that the guy from Office Space was insistent that she read. But this movie makes a cardinal sin, in my opinion, by making Leatherface like an anti-hero instead of the straight murdering psychopath that he is. Inherently, Leatherface is a sympathetic character. A lot of the interpretations of him is him being manipulated by his family to use his strength, and you do feel bad for the character to a certain extent, although it's still his choice to carve up limbs and cut faces off. That's totally on him. But I get that there's a certain degree of sympathy that comes along with the character. That does not mean make the mayor, make the town people the real enemies, and make Leatherface the anti-hero slash maybe good guy. This man cuts one of her friends in half, he's responsible for another friend dying by cutting the tire, and then for some reason at the end of this movie, she throws him the chainsaw and says the line,
"Do your thing, cuz."
And not only that, at the end of this movie, she decides to live with Leatherface, even though he killed her friends. This movie's dog shit, guys. If you feel differently, please let me know in the comments. I would love to see somebody defend this movie. Horrible. All right, here we go. First hot take coming in, guys. The Texas Chainsaw Massacre: The Next Generation. I know like 95% of the fandom would probably consider this one of the worst movies in the franchise. I unironically love this movie, guys. This is legitimately one of my top picks in the entire franchise.
I like this guy. Now fuck this guy.
Let me explain real quick. Like I said, I don't really love these movies, so I instantly gravitate towards the more goofy, over-the-top ones because they are memorable as hell. I could go rewatch The Next Generation once every 3 months and be so happy. You know, you have Matthew McConaughey being an absolute psycho, but you have, you know, 2 future Oscar winners in Matthew McConaughey and Renee Zellweger as Jenny. I like Jenny as one of the final girls in this franchise. I like her more than Sally, another hot take. But this movie is absolutely ridiculous between the air pump for his knee brace, the government Illuminati tie-in to the Sawyer family. Guys, it's so bad that it's what I call delicious garbage, and I have a really good time with it. Matthew McConaughey chews the scenery, and I just love Vilmer. I think he's the most memorable character in the entire series. I will give you it has the weakest Leatherface. I would absolutely agree, I wouldn't argue that point. But even the characters you're supposed to hate, like Barry at the beginning, guy is a total douchebag on the levels of Trent from the Friday the 13th remake, but at least he knows he's a douche, and I can have a lot of laughs with Barry. And just, I love how crazy the family is. I love Matthew McConaughey. Dude is a legend. He should absolutely be a meme god up there with Bully Maguire. And I genuinely have a good time with how batshit crazy this movie is. Next up, another hot take incoming, guys. Now this is the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre from 1974. I know, I'm putting it below The Next Generation.
I like this guy. Now fuck this guy.
This just isn't a very rewatchable movie for me. This is a movie that I more respect from a distance, more than I thoroughly enjoy. I find the first half hour of it extremely boring. The final 20 minutes is just Sally screaming nonstop. That's why the old kook is one of my favorite characters, because he puts a sock in her mouth and actually shuts her up for a while. The dinner scene is properly creepy. The first appearance of Leatherface is really well done, and I do like the sound design. That being said, I don't like much else about this movie. I think the pacing is absolutely dreadful. I think Sally is a very dumb final girl. Like every time she maybe has a chance to sneak away in the woods, she's still screaming at the top of her lungs. Franklin, who a lot of people love, most of his screen time, he's just like whining, crying, giving raspberries. Look, I understand if you grew up with this movie. If you saw this in theaters, it must have been absolutely insane. If you grew up with it, I'm sure you have a warm spot in your heart for it. I saw this movie for the first time in 2002 when I was like 12 years old, before the remake. I don't get much enjoyment out of it. I can appreciate what it did for the genre, like everybody says, but I have to be honest with myself. I don't really find myself going back to this movie almost ever. All right, next up we have the latest entry into the franchise, the 2022 Netflix Texas Chainsaw Massacre. When I first watched this movie, I probably would have put it here or maybe even here. It's grown on me ever so slightly, but it still, to me, belongs in the do your thing cuz. I mean, it does have a nice breezy, like hour and 17 minute, hour and 27 minute runtime. You know, it gets in, it gets out. It has some really memorable fucking kills. The bus scene is really dope. The fight with the mechanic is good. You have like the door swinging, and each time, you know, a little less, but it's showing the gore behind the door of like the hammer kill. That is a really cool shot. And my biggest issue here is, first of all, Melanie, I fucking hated. She got a little better throughout the movie, but she's absolutely insufferable as a character. And as far as our main girl, I do think movies should have commentary on things like school shootings, gun violence. That's important. But there's a right way to do it. Like the Fallout with Jenna Ortega from a few years ago. And then there's the absolute wrong way to do it, and this is it. Like, what makes it feel so scummy here is that it's in a movie that's otherwise like a campy horror film with just like fun kills, with Leatherface throwing his fucking chainsaw at vehicles. And it didn't belong in a movie like this. There's a right way to tell that story, and it doesn't have enough payoff, and it feels kind of gross and scummy in this kind of movie that's otherwise a joke. But the worst thing about this movie, without a doubt, is the absolute atrocity of Sally Hardesty as a legacy character. You know, first of all, they had to recast her because, unfortunately, the original actress passed away years before, I think in 2014. The actress wasn't great, the story was a clear ripoff of Halloween 2018, and her character is so dumb in this movie. How is this girl who has lived with her trauma for 48 years that escaped the Sawyer family the dumbest fucking character in your movie? Like 2 or 3 times she has a point-blank shot at Leatherface with her shotgun, and instead she's like, "Do you remember me? Do you remember my friends?" Like, bitch, no. Leatherface doesn't remember anybody. He's an equal opportunity killer. Shoot this man. Kill him on the spot. Like, she literally at one point has the gun to his head. She watches him stand up, grab his chainsaw, and fucking walk right past her. It is the dumbest thing I've ever seen. It's just such a disservice to the character, and it's another thing about this movie that feels scummy. Why you would take what many people consider one of the best final girls and completely ruin her like this. I don't get that decision, and it really pissed me off. Next up, here we go. This is the 2003 Texas Chainsaw remake, and this is My Golden Chainsaw. They definitely played this much darker, which I appreciated. This Leatherface is terrifying. Arlie Ermy is a national fucking treasure that always commands the screen. He always chews his scenery as the bad guy. Jessica Biel's great. I do wish it had a little more of the dark humor from the first movie, and a lot of these movies. But you know, it was going for the more serious tone, and it's fantastic, guys. This is a movie that genuinely got under my skin. This is a movie that kind of scared me because of how fucking brutal Leatherface is. You know, Arlie Ermy just plays the perfect scumbag Sheriff Hoyt, which we'll learn in the prequel. He's not the sheriff, but Arlie Ermy just plays that character to a fucking T. He's such a scumbag in the best way possible. The family is genuinely creepy here. All of the Leatherface stuff is really good. This movie's extremely brutal. It's gore-filled. It has some of my favorite chase sequences between him and Aaron. And I mean, Jessica Biel is a very smart, very capable final girl in this movie. She fucks Leatherface up quite a bit. And I mean, let's be honest. It's Jessica Biel. This is one of the exceptions to the rule where I tend to prefer the goofy entries, and it's one of my favorite horror remakes. Alright guys, now we're down to our final two, and on the note of goofy over the top, we have Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2. I mean, look at that damn poster. It's a clear ripoff of The Breakfast Club. I love that. This is a complete antithesis contrast of the first movie. Tobe Hooper really wanted to make a horror comedy here. And for that reason, another movie I'm putting above the original. I'm sorry guys, but I really like part 2. You know, I love the character Dennis Hopper, I love Lefty. You of course have the introduction of Chop Top, one of the most beloved characters in this franchise. And I mean, how could I not put the movie with Chop Top in the Chop Top tier after all? But you know, you have Chop Top hamming the screen up, you have Leatherface doing his, you know, you added a different dimension with him having a little bit of a crush. And for my money, you want to talk about scares compared to the first movie? Turning the light on in the record vault with Leatherface there scared the shit out of me. And for my money, him cutting the face and putting it on the final girl, to me that is way more creepy and unsettling, I think, than almost anything from the first Texas Chainsaw movie. I just think this movie knew exactly what it was, it knew what it was doing. I love the over-the-top comedic edge it has. I love Chop Top. The old Coot comes back and he's fantastic again. I mean guys, you get a fucking chainsaw battle at the end of this movie between Dennis Hopper and Leatherface. It is so badass. Sure, the movie has a ton of issues, but overall it's a huge departure from the first movie that I don't find myself rewatching, where this second one is a damn good time. This is one you can sit down with your friends, have some drinks, and just laugh at how crazy it is. And then finally, we have the 2006 prequel to the 2003 remake, Texas Chainsaw Massacre: The Beginning. This is the prequel that I actually like and I think is justified. This answers a lot of questions from the remake. First of all, you learn how the Sawyer family member in the wheelchair, you learn how he lost both of his legs, you learn how Arlie Ermey got the status of Sheriff Hoyt. You have pretty interesting characters here where, you know, the one brother is a military veteran and the other one is gonna join the military, but he's actually dodging the draft going to Mexico. I thought that was pretty good commentary, especially with Arlie Ermey's character being like a prisoner of war. You learn why he's a cannibal and where that came from. As he says, you either starve to death or you're a survivor. And I just think if you're gonna do a horror prequel, this is the right way to do it. This answers a ton of questions. And if you're gonna give any side character a prequel story in this franchise, let's be honest, why wouldn't it be Arlie Ermey? So there it is, guys, my final rankings of all 9 movies. Using these tiers, or using your own tier list, let me know where you would rank these movies down in the comments.